Hello. Hello and welcome to another SQL Night. I'm Chatzipavlis and I am the moderator of this SQL Night. I'm data solution consultant and trainer and the founder of SQLschool.gr. Please mute your mics. You will be able to use them when I or our speaker asks you to do this. If you want to ask any question prior to this, you can write your question in the chat or use the raise hand button. SQLschool.gr is a community for Greek professionals who use the Microsoft Data Platform. You can join us as a member or follow us in social media to keep up with our community. This year, SQLschool.gr became 10 years old, and I would like to thank you all for your participation and support. SQL School, since 2013, is the official PAS local group for Greece. PAS is a global community with large number of actions like SQL Saturdays, 24-hour of PAS Marathon, but the biggest event that PAS has is the PAS Summit. This year, this summit, due to COVID-19 pandemic, turns to virtual. Even if we are going to lose the physical interaction, this gives us the opportunity to be able to attend this event from the safety of our house. As a PAS chapter, we are able to give you a discount code to use during your registration for PAS Summit. In this slide, you can see the code. Today, we have the pleasure to have a speaker, a good friend of mine, and one of the world-renowned experts of Power BI, Peter Meyers. Peter is a consultant, trainer, representative for Melbourne, Australia. He has worked with Microsoft database and development products since 1997. Today, he specialized in all Microsoft Business Intelligence products and also authors training courses, content from Microsoft products and services. He has a broad business background supported by a bachelor's degree in applied economics and accounting. And he's extend this with extensive experience backed by current MCSC certification. He has been a data platform MVP since 2007. Welcome, Peter, and we are ready to learn from you. Peter.
Well, thank you, Antonios, for the introduction. So let me share my desktop.
Yes, please.
And let me know that you can see and that you can hear me clearly. Okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay, and then my desktop.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you for the introduction and welcome. I will turn on my webcam so you can at least see me wearing my Power BI shirt. That gives me magical powers to talk about Power BI. And thank you for letting me speak to you about Power BI Paginated Reports. So let me begin. I think the introduction has already happened. Thank you, Antonios. So it is my tradition that I like to invite you to tell me a little bit more about yourself. So if you could just take a minute now to use the QR code or the URL, and you'll be presented with some questions, and this tells me a little bit more about you. You see, virtual events are different. I don't get to see your faces. I don't get to see your body language. And so this is a great time for you to tell me about you. Yeah, okay, I can see Antonios's. That is not your real office though, right?
No, of course.
It's a fake background. I would expect to see the Acropolis in the background.
It's not near to me.
Well, I'll let you know it's 11 p.m. on Sunday here in Melbourne. So this is, I'll be going straight to bed after this presentation. Okay, so looking to see if any results are coming through real time.
And this is a Power BI dashboard, of course.
Yes, this is a Power BI real-time dashboard. There we go. Some results are flowing in. So the real-time story is actually becoming more interesting just as these results are coming in. So we now have the automatic page refresh on reports so that reports also can be real-time. And that's in preview at the moment. So check that out. All right, now what I'm looking for is that this topic really appeals to report authors. So they could be BI developers or they could be business analysts. But of course, it can appeal to anybody that just is interested to know more about what Power BI can do. I'm less interested in the age group and the gender. That's just extra data. And then knowing your Power BI experience helps me as well. So we have people that have got minimal experience and we have people that have good moderate experience. Okay, so I always like to use this as an example about business intelligence, that my next question is, well, what is the average Power BI experience? And that's a question that this dashboard has not been designed to answer. So I'd like to remind you of the very cool capability of Q&A. So when I have this question, I just type in the word in English. Sorry, no Greek support, but we have average, and then I have the autocomplete. Just tell me what the average Power BI experience is, and I can see that 3.91 is the exact answer, and I can pin that visual back to my dashboard, and then I can continue to monitor that specific metric. Awesome. All right, now the other thing I can do is click on a tile and drill through to the underlying report. So there I see the experience, but I did ask you the question, what was important for you in this presentation? Now this surprises me because the topic is clearly Power BI Paginated Reports, yet you're telling me that the most important topic is Power BI Reports. And down the bottom, we see the topic of Paginated Reports. Well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Power BI reports, but I will compare them to paginated reports. And then lastly, let me just show you the decomp tree. This has nothing to do with my topic tonight, but if you haven't explored the decomp tree, check out how easily I can explore your rating to see, you know, the highest rating is coming from IT manager, the BI developers that I'm really targeting, you know, what age group are they coming from? So this is a great way for you to understand your data through interaction. But it's not the topic of tonight. So thanks for the introduction. The topic is paginated reporting. So I'm going to introduce what paginated reports are. I'm going to give you an end-to-end demonstration on authoring a Power BI report that's paginated, and then share with you the user experience, leave with you compelling reasons why you would author paginated reports, and then talk briefly about migration of SQL Server reports to Power BI. Lastly, there are going to be some excellent resources, so stay tuned, and I'll leave you with online resources like video training and study kits. All right, well, let's begin with what paginated reports are. They're sometimes called pixel perfect reports because you have a high degree of control over how you lay out your report designs. But perhaps what is most important is that paginated reports are designed for printing, either to paper or printing to page formatted documents like a PDF or even a Word document. They come from SQL Server reporting services. So this takes me back all the way to the year 2003. And I remember this new product coming from Microsoft, which was SQL Server reporting services. Well, this product continues to evolve. And so today we see the latest evolution of SQL Server reporting is the ability to host these reports in Power BI as paginated reports. So they're ideal for operational type reports like a sales order, and they're developed using a very different tool. The tool is Power BI Report Builder. Now let's compare that to Power BI reports that we can call interactive analytic reports. And these reports are about exploration and discovery of patterns and relationships in your data. And most of you are probably already familiar with these reports developed in Power BI Desktop. So let's take a look at the comparison of a Power BI report to a paginated report. So I'm in an app here, and you can see that I'm currently on a report named the Sales Analysis. Now, this is the first page of the report, and being a Power BI report, I can easily interact. I've got beautiful modern visualizations. I can hover over columns to see values, and in fact, I can even cross-filter the page to interact and then see the result of that selection through the other visuals. Now, I have a second page on this report that is called the sales order. Let's take a look. Now, the sales order report is a little bit different because for a single sales order, it's presenting to me the order lines that have been purchased by a customer. Now, specifically, we can see the order is number 51721. Remember that number because I'll be using it in demonstration later. And then we can see that there is 11 orders. Well, actually, no, because if I scroll vertically down, I see the reality is there are 72 order lines. Well, let's see what happens when I export this Power BI report to PDF. Now, this process of export actually takes a little bit of time because in the Power BI service, what it's doing is re-rendering the report, and it's literally taking a screen image of it as a photo, and then it's putting it into a PDF document. So this takes somewhere between 20 or 30 seconds. Now, as Antonio said, if you have questions, I will stop at certain times and answer those. So feel free at any time during the presentation to log your questions. And yes, Antonio has let us know that Rosetta was the code name for reporting services. Rosetta being the name of, wasn't the Egyptian hieroglyphics, where they broke the code for learning the Egyptian ancient language. All right. Well, look what's happened. A PDF document has been downloaded to my browser, and I want to point out to you that it's 2 pages long, okay? Each page of the Power BI report, but I'm clicking on the slicer, and as you can imagine, this slicer is just an image, so I cannot interact with it. So I scroll down to page 2, and look at this problem here is that I cannot scroll to see all of the detail. So this is not a good way to deliver a sales order to my customer. So let's see a different experience that in the same Power BI app, I have a paginated report. And the paginated report is for the same sales order number, number 51721. I have really slow internet today. This is crazy. There we go. All right, so there we see it, 51721. And what I will do is point out to you that I can navigate between the pages. And look at this, page question mark. All right, well, let's navigate to the last page to see that there are in fact 2 pages. And I'll export this to PDF, but what have we got here? We've got all of these other formats supported by paginated reports. Well, let's go for PDF. And this should be a little bit faster because paginated reports are designed to render in multi-formats. We see this is a 3-page report. Now look at this. On the piece of paper, we have a header, we have a table with a header, and then as I scroll down, we'll see that there are page footers. And then on our last page, number 3, I can also see that I've got my totals here and here. All right, so to me, this is a really good example that compares a Power BI report to a paginated report. Remember, it's about operational data that is likely to be multiple pages and is likely to be printed and distributed. Now, before I get into the details, I want a conversation with you about licensing. So there are several topics here. First of all, you can download Power BI Report Builder for free. There is no cost. You can develop reports, you can preview reports, there is no cost. But if you're going to publish them to the Power BI service, you will need a dedicated workspace. And that workspace is available to you either because you have Premium or you have Azure Power BI. Okay, although Azure is only supported for embedded or testing and development scenarios. Now that dedicated capacity needs to have the paginated reports workload enabled. So that reserves processing resources to the capacity so that it can render paginated reports. And then lastly, you're going to need the Power BI Pro license to publish your paginated reports to a workspace. If it's a personal workspace, no problem. But if it's an app workspace, you will need a Power BI Pro license. Okay, so now that we've had that conversation, let me introduce to you Report Builder, which is the authoring tool for paginated reports. I'm going to introduce to you also how we can retrieve data, how we can parameterize, how we can visualize data, interact, and publish. All right, so it all begins with launching Power BI Report Builder. And the first thing that I see is that I'm prompted for creating a new report, and I have the assistance of all of these wizards. Okay, and they're helpful for beginners, but tonight I'm going to use a blank report. Okay, and so what we see is the blank report is here. And the first thing I do on the ribbon is save this report. I'm going to save it locally to my computer, and I'm going to save it to a demo folder that I have. So I'm going to call this the sales order for Greece. Now, notice up here in the title bar that we have the RDL extension. All right, so for anybody familiar with SQL Server reporting services, RDL reporting, this is very much the same thing. And as an introduction, here we have a ribbon, just like in Office products. On the left-hand side, we have the report data pane where we can create and manage different report resources. Along the bottom, we've got, what do we got? The row groups and the column groups. So when we're working with data regions, this is where we configure and control the groupings of our data. But wait, there's more. On the View Ribbon tab, I've got a Properties window, and this is where we can expose properties for the report or any element in our report design. I'll point out to you also that there are property pages, and these property pages allow you to configure commonly used properties. I'll demonstrate this. And then lastly, there's a parameters pane up here, and that allows you to lay out parameters in a way that suits your report design. And these parameters are often used by your report users to filter the report. Okay, last thing to look at then is that we've got the report canvas. And so in fact, what you see here is a layout that consists of the body and a report footer. So there's two parts to this template. And then you'll see there are text boxes in the header and the footer. The text box in the body, is prompting for the title, and we can see the report execution time is in the footer. Well, because this is a paginated report, the first thing that I do is I open up the report property pages. And when I can do that, the most important thing to consider is what is the page layout for my report? Okay, so I think Greece, like Australia, we use centimeters. So I'm going to change the page units. That will default to your regional settings, by the way. And then my sales order will be portrait, but the paper size will be A4. Or I could customize to the height and width that I want. And then next for the margins, I'm going to set these each to 1 centimeter. Now, we need to do a little bit of mathematics, because if the width of my page is 21 centimeters and the margins on the left and right are each 1 centimeter, that leaves me 19 centimeters for the layout of my report. So I commit those properties, I click the body of the report, and look at this, I'm now here at the body properties. So then I can go ahead and modify the size. So specifically, I know that the width of my report is 19 centimeters. And then I'm going to go ahead and move that execution time into the bottom right. And then I'll put the word sales order in the title. Okay, now a problem with this design is that this text box is inside the body. That means we will see it at the beginning of the report, but we will never see it again. I would like the title to repeat on every report page. So on the insert ribbon, I can easily go ahead and add a header, and then I will move the text box to the top left of the header. It will now repeat on every page. And the next thing I'd like to do is to look at my report items. I can add text boxes for any text. I could add a company logo as an image, and I have lines and rectangles as well. So I right click in the header, and then I insert an image. And images, this is very interesting, by the way, for paginated reports, images can come from web URLs. They can be embedded into the report design, or they could be retrieved from your databases. Okay, I'll use an embedded image, and I have the AdventureWorks company logo that I'll embed. So I'll position that at the top left. Look in my report data that the image is now a resource of the report itself. And now on the home ribbon, I will preview my report design by running it. And when I do this, I get to see the report rendered in HTML, but perhaps what's more useful is I can switch to print layout. And that allows me to see what my page now looks like. So here's a perfect first page with a title, with a logo at the top left, and with the execution time down here at the bottom right. All right, let's make this much more interesting by adding some data. So in my report data pane, this is where I can right click and I can add data from. Now this is the first big difference from SQL Server reporting services. And that is that we can retrieve data using MDX or DAX by querying a data set in Power BI. Today, however, because this is operational data, I'm going to retrieve data from an Azure SQL database. But while I'm here, we could also query Azure Analysis Services or Azure SQL Data Warehouse. This has since been rebranded as Azure Synapse Analytics. We have on-premises sources like SQL Server, SQL Server Analysis Services, Oracle, and Teradata, and there is a new one. Okay, so Power BI Paginated Reports also supports entering static data sets, just like Power BI Desktop can do. All right, so let me select Azure SQL Database. I click Build, and then I'm going to create my connection to the Azure SQL Database. And then I will use a SQL login, my read-only user, and then I'll enter the database name. AdventureWorks GW 2020, test the connection. Very slow, but it succeeded. And then when I click OK, my connection string is copied into the data source. And so what I like to do is copy the name of the database so it becomes the unique name of the data source in my report. Now, creating the data source is just step number one. We need to retrieve some data from the source. So when I right click, I can add a data set. Now, don't be confused because the word dataset in Power BI means something different to a dataset in paginated reports. So in Power BI, a dataset represents your data model, whereas in a paginated report, the dataset is a command to retrieve data. All right, now I'm going to provide a unique name that is DS main because it is the main or the principal data for my report. And then I have the ability, using my AdventureWorks DW connection, to use either a text query. I could copy this from my favorite tool like Management Studio, or I could use a stored procedure, or I could use a graphical query designer, as I will do now. So let me go ahead, and I have to re-authenticate for some reason. Read-only user. And then I will build up a query to retrieve all of the sales order details. Okay, so from the AdventureWorks database, in my fact reseller sales table, this is where I see the order line number. So I check the checkbox. And in a related table for the DIM reseller, this is where I find the reseller name. And then the DIM product table gives me the English product name. And then back in factory seller sales, give me the quantity and the price and give me the sales amount. Now, what I've just done is I've built up a collection of fields, 6 of them. I'll point out to you that if I needed to, I could group and summarize this data, but today I don't need to do that. But what I do need to do is add a filter. So when I click on this icon, I can build up a filter that says, use the sales order number. Now remember that number that I demonstrated. It was number 51721. Okay, so let's produce a filter for sales order 51721. And then I'm going to run the query to test it. This usually doesn't take a long time. My virtual machine is not very healthy today. But here we can see that the query is retrieving for us the 72 order lines. Okay, so everything looks good. There's one last consideration. This checkbox here is very powerful because it allows me to parameterize my filter so that the report user can change the filter value. So by checking this checkbox and then clicking OK, look what happens. A select statement is copied into my dataset properties. And then you'll see that there is a where clause. And the where clause includes what we call a query parameter. This @ symbol here means a value will be substituted at query execution time. Now, before I complete my dataset properties, I like to move to the second page because the fields can be renamed into more concise, friendly names, right? So this one is just the reseller. This one here is just the product. This is quantity. This is price. This is sales. And now when I click OK, I want you to notice what happens here, here, and here. Okay, so there's a lot of automatic behavior, and what we see is this. There is a data set that has 6 fields. There's a parameter here called sales order number, and in the parameters folder is where I find that parameter. So let me go ahead and open up its properties. It has a unique name. It has a prompt, so when I change this, it will actually change what we see here. It also has available values, so we can provide a drop-down list. In default values, you'll see the sales order number that I used in the query designer is here. Now, ordinarily, this is not a good thing, not for a sales order number, but as I'm designing the report, it's very helpful to have defaults, because I'm going to move from design to preview and design to preview, design preview. Having defaults makes it much faster to test my report. All right, so I'm ready to lay out the data, and you'll now see that we've got a renamed, more friendly parameter for the report. Now, when you use a parameter to filter your report, it's often a good idea to communicate that filter back through a text box. So I'm going to add a text box into the header. And the text box here is very, very powerful. Look at this, order number, and then I inject a placeholder. And the placeholder is an expression. And I can build up an expression like this. All right, so the expression says, give me the value, okay, of the sales order number parameter. This is using VB.NET as its expression language. Now, you don't need to be a developer, but if you are a developer, it gives you a great deal of control over how you assign properties dynamically through expressions. Now, in the text box, I can independently format. All right, so here I'm going to format the order number in bold. And let me do one more. I'll insert another text box. And this time I will communicate the name of the reseller. So this time the placeholder expression will be built from a dataset field using the value of the reseller field. All right, so let's go ahead, and that wasn't supposed to happen. I lost it. One more time, reseller, placeholder, expression, dataset, reseller field. Go ahead and preview the report and see what it looks like for my sales order. All right, so there you can see the default parameter of 51721, and here we can see the order number and the reseller name. All right, so now we're ready to build up a list of all of the sales order lines themselves. So on the insert ribbon, I want to show you this, that there are actually two groupings of visualizations. Like here, we have what are called data regions, and then here we have data visualizations. The big difference is that data regions are a template, and that template will expand according to the amount of data and the groupings that you configure. So a table, like in Power BI reports, has fixed columns, but its vertical height depends on how much data it must show. A matrix, similar to Power BI reports, is grouping on columns and on rows. So think about this, that a matrix can grow horizontally, but it can also grow vertically. These are very powerful, and for this reason, they will overflow to multiple pages if necessary. Now there's a third one, which is the list, and the list is just really a rectangle. All right, so it's a rectangle, but you can add other elements to the rectangle, like images, and it can repeat that rectangle for each grouping of your data. Now, the data visualizations then, these are more about graphical representation. So charts and gauges and maps. Okay, Power BI reports actually do a much better job for these. Okay, so I would be tempted to do data visualization in Power BI reports, but data regions in paginated reports. All right, so for my fixed columns, I'm going to introduce a table, and I'll position it at the top left of the body. And in fact, what the table is a collection of text boxes. All right, but they work together in a template. This is the header row, this is the detail row, 1 column, 2 column, 3 column. All right, now when I hover over a text box, I get the field picker. And this allows me to add the line field in the first column and the product field in the second column and the quantity in the third column. Then I right-click the column header to introduce a column to the right, and this is my price. And I do it one more time to introduce sales. All right, let's preview the report and now see what it looks like. All right, I admit it's not very beautiful. All right, the table header could be more attractive. We could left justify this. I could probably increase the size of this column so that the word doesn't wrap. These column headers could be right justified, and certainly we could format these in a better way. All right, so that's pretty easy. Actually, one more thing. If I go to the last page, there is no total. So let's work with the totals first. And that's easy. For quantity and for sales, I can right-click and really easily add a total. Now, what it's really done is it's add a footer row to the table. So I'm going to put the word total in the first column, and then I'm going to multi-select all of the text boxes and let me make them bold. Okay, and now I'll go to the header for the table and I'll format that in a nice style. I could use green and have a look at this. I could also configure the property here, or I could configure it on the ribbon here. And then I'm going to use white as the font color. I'm going to make it bold. I'm going to increase the font size. I could even increase the height of the text box, and then I could align to the middle. And in fact, the last 3 text boxes will be right aligned. So these text boxes are just like cells in Excel. For the same formatting, they could have constant values or they could have expressions, which is the case here. The expression is, give me the line value from the fields. Okay, so that's the VB.NET dynamically assigning a value to the text box. Let me align the first column to the left. Let me make the width of the product wider. I'm going to format the currency as a whole number. Okay, or my preference is to use the formatting options here. N for numeric, 0 for 0 decimal places. The .NET developers know these codes and they work in paginated reports also. So for these columns, I could format as C for currency and 2 for 2 decimal places. All right, now let's run the report, see how it looks. All right, much, much better. And we can see that the report is running to 3 pages long. So when I scroll to the next page, I see a new problem. By default, the table header does not repeat on other pages. Okay, so this is how it's done, and Microsoft have done a terrible job of this because to control repeating a table header, you have to turn on advanced mode for the groupings. And then when I choose any one of the static row groups, there's a property here called repeat on new page. All right, so when I configure this as true, and now I run the report, we will see that page 2 and page 3 repeats the table header. Okay, and there it is on page 2. All right, well, let's take a closer look then at the page footer. All right, so we can see here the page footer is the execution time of the report. Well, I can make that better. Let me increase the size of the text box in the footer. And then I open up the expression window for the text box, and you'll see that it's actually using the expression execution time from globals. Okay, now the globals are in fact the built-in fields that you have available. So when I look at built-in fields, there's the execution time, but I can also see the language of the report. I can know who the user is that's running the report, and that's very powerful for, you know, row-level security or customizing the look and feel for different users. I can even determine the name of the render format and do something different. If it's rendered as Excel, I can do something different if it's rendered as Word or PDF. All right, now execution time. First thing to know is execution time uses local time in Power BI Report Builder. But when you publish to Power BI, which is a cloud service, and this is the case for all cloud services, is they don't use local time. They use Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC. So I'm just going to put some text here, executed UTC colon, and then concatenate. And look at my functions. I have a text function here called format. So I'm going to format the execution time as a long date. And you'll see that you've got an explanation here and you've got an example given to you here. Now I'll continue by building up the page number as well. All right, so the page comes from my built-in fields, and then I've got the page number here, and then I can continue to build up my string to say of total pages. So this large expression now is going to produce this result that we see here. Executed UTC Sunday, June 21. And this is page 1 of 3. All right, so I've pretty much arrived at the end of my report design, and so I'm ready to publish it. And there's two things I'll do before I publish it. So first of all, you know, this space here is the reason why sometimes you get an extra blank page at the end. Okay, so I make sure that I remove any extra space. And then I come to my report parameter and the default values, and I remove the default value. I click OK. I save my report. Now remember, that is a local document, but now I save as to the Power BI service, and this is the publication to the service. Now I just need to choose the workspace that I'm publishing to. And apologies for the slowness. There's some crazy networking on my virtual machine.
Peter, we have a question.
Yeah, now is a good time.
Okay, continue your demo.
Well, I'll come to the question as soon as I've got to the end of this publication. So let me save the RDL document. It is now published to the service, and now I can come to Power BI service and then move to my demo RDL, and then we see right here the sales order for Greece. And the difference now, of course, is it's rendering the report for me in the Power BI service. Okay, now's a great time. Antonios, what's the question?
Apostolos asked about the licensing. What does it mean, dedicated capacity?
It means you have a diamond. Okay, so when you see a diamond next to a workspace, that tells us that the workspace is on dedicated capacity. Now, what does a dedicated capacity mean? It means that in a data center of Microsoft, you can imagine that one of the computers is yours. It is dedicated to processing your Power BI workloads. If it's not a dedicated capacity, it's what we call a shared capacity. And a shared capacity is shared with many Microsoft customers. You're sharing the same hardware. Now, when you have dedicated capacity, you have more control and you have more ability for more throughput and larger model sizes. There's also other features like the ability to share content to free users. Okay, so dedicated capacity is part of Microsoft's licensing, available through Power BI Premium or through Azure Power BI. You can think of it as dedicated compute resources and enterprise features as part of the license. Power BI Paginated Reports is one example of an enterprise feature available with dedicated capacities. All right, so that is my end-to-end demo. But Antonios, how many minutes do I have to continue talking? Because I could demo some more if there's time.
We have nothing. We have any limitation. Is
it a beautiful day in Athens? Because I'm not sure. I might prefer to be out in Athens having a nice dinner than watching a video.
Today it's a beautiful day, but from tomorrow we are going to have a thunderstorm.
All right. Well, let me continue the demo just a little bit more because I want to show you some of the really interesting things for paginated reports. So my users complain to me that they cannot remember what the order numbers are. Is there a better way to do this? And yes, there is. So what I'm going to do is create a new data set, and that data set will be named DS Reseller. And I'm going to build up a query to retrieve the resellers. Okay, so that's easy. I want the reseller key and I want the reseller name. Okay, so that gives me a simple list of resellers. Now I'll make one adjustment, and that is that I'm going to order the resellers in alphabetic order, not in reseller key order. So I just add an order by clause here, and I order by the reseller name. Now that I have a second data set, I'm going to add a new parameter, and I will name this the reseller key. The prompt will be reseller, the data type is integer, and the available values in a drop-down list will come from my new data set. And look at this, we've got a value and we have a label. All right, so what I'm going to do is click OK. You now see the addition of a new parameter up here, but I'm going to move them around. I want reseller to be first. Okay, so now when I render this report, look at this. We can choose from the resellers in an alphabetic list. But the next thing is I want the order number to be available also in a list. And so I'm going to create a third data set. This is the DS order number. And I'm just going to type in the query here that I want the distinct sales order number from fact reseller sales. And this is the important part where the reseller key equals, remember the query parameter, at reseller key. And then I ask it to order by sales order number in descending order. Okay, so that reseller key is here. Now, when I create this type of relationship, and now I configure this parameter to use the DS order number, this is the behavior that we get. I choose a reseller, and then the next drop-down list gives me the orders for the reseller. It's what we call a cascading parameter. And you can have many of these, very, very powerful. The other thing I want to show you is that the table here is really much more powerful than just a list, okay? So what I'm going to do is add a grouping to it. But first, let me add a calculated field to my main data set. And I'm going to call this the line group. I want to group all of the lines in groups of 10. So I create a new field based on an expression. And you'll see that I've got a function called ceiling. All right, ceiling returns the smallest integer greater than or equal to the specified double precision floating point number. Okay, What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take the value of the line, I'm going to divide it by 10, and I'm going to get the ceiling of it. For example, if the line is number 1, 1 divided by 10 is 0.1, the ceiling is 1. Okay, and then I multiply it by 10. So the first 10 lines belong to group 10. The next 10 lines belong to group 20. Let me demonstrate. So now that I have a new field, I'm just going to introduce it here. Let's just take a look at what it looks like in the table. All right, and I'm going to remove the summarization, and then I'll just run this. So I'll choose an order like active life toys, and what we will see is this. The first 10, the next 10 are 20 and 30 and 40. Okay, good. Then I come back here and I delete this column. But now I'm going to add a group that is a parent group. And I'm going to add a footer. And I'm going to group by the line group field. So you'll now see that I've got this new header, and look at the groupings that I have here on the table. The details are within line group. All right, I'm going to delete the line group column, but what I'm going to do is merge these cells together. All right, and I'm going to name this text box the line group. And here I'll put an expression. The expression is whatever the value of the line group is, subtract 9 from it, and then concatenate to the literal text, and then put the line group here. All right, you'll see in a minute what this does. All right, and then also I'm going to do some indentation here. I'm going to do a left pad of 6, or maybe more, 10. Okay, so that gives me indentation. All right, let's see what it looks like. So when I run this now, when I have large lists, we now see that they're going to be grouped into groups of 10. Okay, done. Now, what's cool is we also have a capability whereby I can control row visibility. And so here I can hide the row, but I can toggle it based on the line group. Let's see what this looks like. And before I do, let me put the quantity and the sales amount into the header here. Okay, so remember we've got a format of N0 and we've got a format of C2, and I'll make this bold. All right, so now what I'm going to do is preview this. I just press Control S to save the report, and it's publishing it to Power BI, but it's very slow today, so I shouldn't have saved it. All right, so now previewing the report. Let me go ahead and choose that active life toys and the first one. And this is an example of the interaction that we can build into a paginated report. Now, what you see here is print layout, but if I turn print layout off, this is HTML layout. And so I've got this ability to expand or collapse. All right, and then I've got summary data here as well. So this is pretty cool stuff. All right, and one last thing I want to demonstrate is that I'll add a parameter here that says, do we expand all line groups? I can let the user decide whether we expand all of the line groups, and I'll make this a Boolean, and I will set the default to false. Now I can come to my row grouping here and the visibility, and I can use an expression to determine whether or not it should expand all. One last time, let's preview the report. And so here I have active life toys, I have the order number. You can see the default is do not expand the line groups. But if I was going to print this to PDF, then I might use this option. And then you can see it expands everything for me automatically. All right, so you have a great deal of control, is my point, here in a paginated report design. So I pretty much demonstrated to you end-to-end, report builder, retrieving data, parameterization, cascading parameters, data visualizations, interactivity, and publication. Now for the user experience, the consumption experience, we can now talk about here. All right, so let me go ahead and just rerun the report now that I've republished it. And I'll just fill this in one more time. So this is active life toys. All right. Now, if you want, you can print direct from the browser. You can download the RDL report. If you have ownership permissions, you can embed this into something like a SharePoint site. So you can copy the URL or the HTML, and you can easily embed this within your organization, or you can produce a hyperlink. And have a look here how the parameter values are in the URL. You can also put the rendering format in there. And speaking of rendering format, here we've got the ability to render to Excel, to Word, to PowerPoint, to PDF, to a web archive, and the data formats of XML and CSV. Now, this one is really important, the Excel, because I hear lots of complaints from my customers. When they export data from Power BI reports, they have limited control over how the data is exported. But in paginated reports, you can create very customized experiences in Excel or CSV or XML for exporting data from Power BI. You have commenting, so this allows you to collaborate on a discussion, but very interesting is the subscription story. All right, so here we can add a subscription to automatically, on schedule, deliver the report as an attachment in any of the rendering formats. Let's use Excel. It can use the current parameters or default parameters. You can email internally, or if your tenant administrator lets you, I could come to Antonios at, now what can I use here? What was it again? It was SQLschool.gr. All right. And it warns me that Antonios might not be trusty. No, it warns me that he's an external email address, so just be careful. And then we have the subject of the email, the body of the email, the frequency of delivery, and then do we allow Antonios to access the report directly in Power BI? Do we give him a link to the report? Do we give him a preview image of the report? And then when I save this, the Power BI service will automatically distribute that report on schedule to those email addresses. So that is the story for consuming, embedding, and delivering. All right, when are you going to use paginated reports? Well, of course, you will need the licenses, you will need the dedicated capacities. But the big story for paginated reports is that they are print ready. They are designed for printing or exporting to PDF. You have 7 different rendering formats. What are they? Web archive, PDF, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, CSV, XML. Precision layout to the fraction of a centimeter, dynamic layout by using VB.NET expressions. And those expressions can deliver render-specific layouts and even per-user layouts. You can write native queries using SQL against SQL Server, Oracle, Teradata. You can use DAX or MDX against Power BI datasets or analysis services. You have graphic query designers that will support you to create your queries. You have new static datasets that are great for demonstration or proof of concept. And then data integration can be achieved in a paginated report. For example, you can have multiple data sources in a single report, but we might suggest to you that Power BI Desktop is a better tool to integrate data, and then you publish your model to the Power BI service, and then a paginated report can query the model. Now, parameterization is another compelling reason to use paginated reports. Very powerful, and you've got cascading parameters like I demonstrated. And images, Power BI reports can't do this, but paginated reports can retrieve images from databases. You can write custom code. So for example, in your report properties, you can build up VB.NET here, and you can build up complex functions, regular expressions. There's even an example that a paginated report can call Azure Functions to do some processing. What else have we got? Flexible grid layouts. The table and the matrix are extremely powerful, and you can configure very precise layouts for your grid data. The mapping in paginated reports is also a very good story. So you can see here the map visual. What's interesting is this map visual can render from SQL Server spatial data types. The geometry data type, the geography data type can be rendered directly to this map. So custom polygons, for example, can be rendered in your report. You need to be careful though, because it will not work for SQL Server, because SQL Server is on premises and Power BI must use the gateway. The gateway doesn't support complex types. Okay, so geography and geometry will only work for Azure SQL or Azure SQL Data Warehouse. Modern gauges, all right, so there's the ability for you to go ahead and insert gauges, and these are not good examples, but they are very good looking. They're like very realistic gauges, so they're good for dashboards and KPI reports. You can render text as HTML. So let me just demo here that on a placeholder, you have the ability to tell paginated report that the text is actually HTML. You see, some databases store rich text as HTML markup in the database. So a paginated report can use that. Now you can also create what we call mail merge reports. You could say, dear customer name, and then you could write a letter and you can inject data into the letter. Okay, so that's interesting to know. You can do that in a paginated report. There are some interactivity features like row visibility and column sorting and hyperlinks. And lastly, the ability to deliver your report as an attachment to email on a scheduled basis with parameterization. So there are 20 reasons to consider paginated reports. The last topic, and I can keep this very brief, is migration from SQL Server reporting services to Power BI. It is possible. It only works for RDL reports, not the KPIs, not the mobile reports. And to make your job easy, there's an unofficial RDL migration tool. It's in GitHub, and it will make things very easy for you. First of all, it checks to see that the report can be migrated. There are some differences. Not all data sources from SQL Server are supported by Power BI, and there is no support for shared data sources, shared data sets, report drill through, or report paths. But what it will do is convert shared data sources and shared data sets to report specific data sources and data sets. And then it can publish them automatically to Power BI for you. Or you can open the RDL in Power BI Report Builder, adjust the design, and then publish to your workspace. All right. Are there any questions, Antonios?
We have a question, what is the difference between paginated reports in Power BI and those in SQL Server reporting services? I answered them. This question, it's none. It's
well,
the same.
No, there is. There is. So not all data sources are supported.
Except this. The functionality, the designer, and all the other stuff is the same.
Well, almost. Okay, so first of all, you get some new things. Querying Power BI data set and enter data. You lose some things. No report drill through, no report parts, and no shared data sources or shared data sets. But you can live with this. So there are some small differences, but 98% it is the same. All right. So when you've got those types of questions, let me share with you some resources. There's a great FAQ page that Microsoft have published that has many common questions are answered. We also have some great documentation at Power BI Docs. So I just want to point out to you that the guidance documentation then will answer many of the questions too. You have about good design practices for Power BI. Okay, unfortunately, it's taking a long time to open the web page. There we go. All right, so in the guidance documentation, we've built up some articles here on everything to do with Power BI. Okay. So, you know, I'm the author of most of these, by the way. So Microsoft engaged me to build documentation. So I want to just point out that in data modeling, this has nothing to do with paginated reports, but we have some excellent articles on relationships, on data reduction techniques, why star schema design is important. But if you come to paginated reports, you'll see that we've built up when you should use them, how best to retrieve data, how best to retrieve images, how to create cascading images, how to avoid blank pages, how to migrate from SSRS. All right, so those links are available to you here. But this is the best resource, Antonios, that I'm sharing, is that if you would like to learn more about paginated reports, we have this URL here, okay? And it will provide you an easy place to locate 24 videos that give you end-to-end training in paginated reports. And I was lucky enough to be in Seattle in February, and I sat down with Christopher Finlan, who is the program manager, and we built this course for you. Now, there's one more excellent thing, and that is that there is a self-study kit. And if you download the study kit, you can work through 8 labs that teach you how to create paginated reports. Now, the good news is you do not need a dedicated capacity. All of the work that you do will be done in Power BI Report Builder, which is free to download and install, and the labs are free, and we wish you good luck and fun as you work through those labs.
Excellent.
Okay. The last thing is I did a very short 30-minute presentation on paginated reports. So if there's somebody that missed today's presentation and you'd like to share a short version of today's presentation, then I include this link from the Microsoft Business Applications Summit. But otherwise, I can just do a very quick ad for my company. I do a lot of Power BI training and I build training content. I do virtual training as well. Now, usually I'm in Athens and I present at your user group live, but I don't think that's going to happen for some time. But if you're ever looking for Power BI training, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, the final resource for you is the QR code or the tiny URL. You can use this to download this presentation as a PDF, and it contains the links that you can then use. So that's pretty much my presentation for you this afternoon. Are there any further questions, Antonios?
No, we haven't.
No.
Just a minute to speak in Greek first. Καμιά ερώτηση, μην τρέπεστε. Okay, now we'll change to English. Questions, please. If you'd like to open your mic, please do. Okay. We would
Okay,
like
I think
to
I answered all questions. How's that?
Okay. We would like to thank you, Peter, for these great presentations. It's always our pleasure, my pleasure, to have to meet Peter in person, but it's very nice to have Peter visually. I hope next time that Peter, that you are going to be in Athens to visit your favorite place. You know that. In Kifissia.
My favorite place is the cake shop in Kifissia. What is the name? Vassos?
Vassos, yes.
Yeah, every time I'm in Athens, I always go there for the cake is the cock cake.
Yes, I know that.
That is my thing. Yep. And the other thing I do when I'm in Athens, it's always the case, is my first meal is barbecued octopus. Is perfect. Okay, so I miss this experience. I think it's interesting that there's discussion. I think Greece wants to open up travel to Australia because we have low cases of coronavirus. Yes. So who knows? There may soon be the potential that there'll be lots of traffic between Greece, New Zealand, and Australia. Right?
Okay. Thank you very much, Peter, for your presentation. Amazing as always. Thank you guys for your participation. We are going to announce the next SQL night, probably at the end of July. Until then, be safe. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody. Good night to you.
Good night.